I was 25 years old when I first met Dorothy, my 60-year-old neighbor. She was elegant, with silver hair always arranged in a neat bundle, and a smile that could light up an entire neighborhood. She had lived in the big house for as long as I could remember, but we didn't know each other well. She was a widow, living alone, with a substantial fortune. Ethan had recently moved to the neighborhood to pursue a career in real estate. I couldn't help but notice Dorothy's huge house and wealth, but didn't plan to take advantage of it until the financial difficulties began. The bills were piling up, and despite my best efforts, I wasn't seeing a return on my investment. Sitting in my apartment one evening, I remembered Dorothy's condition and wondered if she could help me. I had heard that she was involved in philanthropy, but realized I couldn't just ask her to do it. She was witty and would sense that I was trying to get something. I decided to get to know her better and started spending more time in the neighborhood, running into her at the market, post office, and other places. We struck up a conversation, and over time I learned about her love of art, her history in the fashion industry, and her generosity. My admiration for her grew. Dorothy was no ordinary woman. She lived life to the fullest, and I wondered if I could become part of her world. One day she waved to me from the porch and invited me to come in for a cup of coffee. "Jacob, what's wrong? You seem tense lately." "It's okay," I smiled, trying to hide my discomfort. "Same as usual, starting a business." "Come in for coffee," she said warmly. "You shouldn't be alone all the time." I hesitated, but her voice made me feel welcome. Inside, I was struck by the elegance of her home. We sat on her couch, sipping coffee, and talked about life and problems. She was surprisingly open and kind, sharing stories of her difficulties in her late husband's business. For the first time in a long time, I felt less alone. Dorothy was more of a mentor than anyone else, and her wisdom helped me feel like I was truly noticed. The conversation turned to more personal topics, and I began to feel comfortable with her. We talked about relationships, loss, and fears. I realized I was drawn to her, but tried to push the thought away. As she leaned forward to pour more coffee, I admired her hands, her face, the way the light played on her silver hair. The next day I saw her through the window, moving gracefully through the house. I couldn't stop thinking about her and knew I had to see her again. When I rang her doorbell that evening, I just wanted to continue our conversation. Dorothy, dressed in a soft robe, invited me in. "You were just in time. I was just about to take a shower," she said playfully. "Do you want to wait here?" I smiled awkwardly. "I can wait outside if you want," I said, but she insisted I stay. I sat down on the couch, feeling the tension in the air. The sound of the shower filled the house and my thoughts raced. I stepped forward and opened the bathroom door. She was there, her body glistening under the jets of water. She hadn't expected to see me, and I was lost in the moment. When she saw me, she folded her arms in shock. "Jacob," she said softly, unsure, but kindly. "I didn't expect you to still be here." I stood, at a loss for words. She stepped closer, and I noticed the vulnerability in her eyes. She reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair away from my forehead, and her fingers lingered on my skin. Dorothy leaned forward and kissed me gently. It was soft and natural, which took me by surprise. My heart raced as her hands rested on my chest. "Jacob, it's okay," she said, her voice soothing. But my heart was still pounding. There was a calmness in Dorothy's eyes, as if she knew this moment would come. She stroked my arm, and for the first time I felt like I was really being seen, not as a struggling young man, but as someone with emotions and fears. "Jacob, things have changed between us, and that's okay. Feel what you feel. I'm not going anywhere." Her words struck me to the core. I had come into her life wanting to succeed in business, but somewhere along the way I began to see something more in her. I'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "I didn't mean for things to turn out this way." "You don't have to say anything," Dorothy said softly. "Life gives us surprises when we least expect it." She stepped back, her hand lingering on my shoulder. "Give me a minute," she said. "I need to get dressed, but we'll talk, Jacob. We'll figure it out." I nodded. She disappeared into the bathroom, and I was left alone with my thoughts. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what had happened. When she returned, dressed in a soft blouse and jeans, everything was different. She seemed calm, peaceful. "Are you okay?" she asked, studying me with her gaze. "I'm just confused," I replied. "Confusion is normal," she replied. "We'll take it one step at a time, Jacob. Whatever happens, we'll get through this together." Her words calmed my mind. I felt myself relaxing and the knot in my stomach loosening. "Thank you," I whispered, "for being patient with me. I'm here for you, Jacob, and I'm not going anywhere." I went to bed that night with mixed emotions: confusion, excitement, uncertainty, but also peace. Dorothy had given me the opportunity to be myself without fear of judgment. The next morning I walked past her house, wondering if she was thinking about what had happened. I knew I didn't want to rush things. With Dorothy, I found someone who didn't rush or force things, and that gave me hope. I realized that I had fallen in love with her, not for her wealth, but for who she was. I had come into her life with selfish intentions, but it had grown into something real. I had to admit the truth. The next day I went to Dorothy's house with my heart pounding frantically. I rang the doorbell, and she smiled warmly as always. We sat down in the living room and I told her the truth. "I had a plan," I confessed. "I thought I could use you. I was selfish." Dorothy looked at me, her eyes full of understanding. "I know, Jacob. I knew from the beginning. But I've also seen how you've changed. You're not the same person you were." "I'm so sorry," I said. "I never meant to hurt you." "What matters now is what happens next," she said. "We can either go our separate ways or we can see where this goes, but only if it's real, no lies." Her words struck me. I wanted to take the risk. "I want to be with you, Dorothy. Not for anything you have, but because I care about you. I love you." A soft smile spread across her lips. She took my face in her hands and whispered, "I love you too, Jacob." She kissed me gently, and I felt peaceful. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was where I needed to be with her, as partners, as equals, as lovers.